The cabin stood alone in the dense forest, shrouded in a thick mist that clung to the trees like ghostly fingers. I had rented it for the weekend, eager to escape the pressures of city life. It was supposed to be a retreat, a place where I could unwind and disconnect. Little did I know, it would become the site of my worst nightmares. The sun was setting as I pulled up the gravel driveway. The cabin, though rustic and charming in the pictures, now seemed foreboding. Its dark wooden exterior was partially obscured by overgrown vines, and the windows reflected the dying light like vacant eyes. I shivered, blaming the chill in the air and my overactive imagination. Inside, the cabin was surprisingly cozy. A fire roared in the stone fireplace, casting a warm glow across the room. I dropped my bags and sank into an old, worn armchair, feeling the tension begin to melt away. The silence was profound, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the occasional creak of the wooden beams. As darkness fell, I decided to explore the cabin. The main room was open and inviting, with a kitchen area and a large dining table. A narrow hallway led to 2 bedrooms and a small bathroom. The master bedroom had a large window that overlooked the forest, now an inky black void. I closed the curtains, feeling a strange sense of unease. I settled back in the living room with a book, but my attention kept drifting to the sounds outside. The wind howled through the trees, and every now and then I thought I heard faint whispers. I shook my head, telling myself it was just the wind. Still, a feeling of being watched lingered, making it hard to concentrate. Around midnight, I decided to call it a night. As I climbed into bed, I heard a faint tapping on the window. I froze, heart pounding. The tapping continued, irregular and insistent. Gathering my courage, I approached the window and slowly pulled back the curtain. Nothing, just the impenetrable darkness of the forest. I tried to brush it off and went to bed, but sleep eluded me. Every creak of the cabin seemed amplified in the stillness of the night. Eventually, exhaustion overcame me, and I drifted into a restless sleep. I awoke to a strange sensation, a feeling of weight pressing down on my chest. My eyes snapped open, and I found myself staring into the eyes of a shadowy figure looming over me. Paralyzed with fear, I couldn't move or scream. The figure leaned closer, its breath cold against my face. Just as I thought I would suffocate, it vanished, and I bolted upright, gasping for air. The room was empty. Heart racing, I stumbled out of bed and into the living room. The fire had died down, and the cabin was plunged into darkness. I fumbled for the light switch, my hands shaking. The lights flickered on, revealing nothing out of the ordinary. I tried to convince myself it was just a nightmare, but the feeling of dread was overwhelming. I decided to make some tea to calm my nerves. As I waited for the kettle to boil, I heard it again, the tapping on the window. This time it was louder, more insistent. I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously approached the window. I shined the beam outside, scanning the darkness. For a moment I saw nothing. Then, the light caught something. A pair of glowing eyes staring back at me from the edge of the forest. I stumbled back, dropping the flashlight. The eyes disappeared, swallowed by the darkness. I scrambled to pick up the flashlight, my hands trembling. When I shined it outside again, there was nothing. I backed away from the window, every instinct telling me to leave the cabin. But where would I go? The nearest town was miles away, and I didn't want to venture into the forest at night. I decided to stay in the living room, where I could keep an eye on the fireplace and the front door. I piled more wood onto the fire, its warmth providing a small measure of comfort. Hours passed and the tapping didn't return. I started to relax, thinking maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was just an animal. I dozed off in the armchair, lulled by the fire's gentle crackle. I woke with a start, the fire reduced to glowing embers. The cabin was silent, but the feeling of being watched was stronger than ever. I sat up, listening intently. That's when I heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible whisper coming from the hallway. My heart pounded as I grabbed the flashlight and crept towards the sound. The whispering grew louder, more distinct. It was coming from the master bedroom. I pushed the door open, the beam of the flashlight cutting through the darkness. The room was empty, but the whispering persisted, now seeming to come from the closet. I approached it, hand shaking as I reached for the handle. I yanked the door open and the whispering stopped. The closet was empty, just like the rest of the room. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. As I turned to leave, I saw it again, the shadowy figure standing in the doorway. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and it began to move towards me. Panic surged through me as I backed away, my flashlight flickering. And I stumbled into the living room, slamming the door behind me. The figure was gone, but I knew it was still there, somewhere in the cabin. I grabbed my keys and ran to the door, determined to leave, but the door wouldn't budge. It was as if something was holding it shut. Desperation set in. I turned to the windows, trying to pry them open, but they were stuck too. I was trapped. The whispering started again, louder and more insistent. It seemed to come from all around me, filling the cabin with a sinister presence. In a final act of desperation, I threw a log from the fireplace through one of the windows. The glass shattered, and cold air rushed in. I climbed through the broken window, cutting myself on the jagged edges, and ran into the forest. I didn't stop running until I reached the road, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I flagged down a passing car, and the driver, seeing my frantic state, let me in without question. As we drove away, I glanced back at the cabin, now a dark silhouette against the dawn sky. The whispering had stopped, but the feeling of dread lingered. I knew I would never return to that cabin. Whatever haunted it, whatever watched from the shadows, could keep its secrets. I was lucky to have escaped with my life, but the memory of that night would haunt me forever.